Yes. At a crime scene like this, you simply cannot afford confusion. Let me analyze this deeply. Because when 1,000 things happen at once, confusion is absolutely inevitable. But when the police step in, they are supposed to be the experts handling this daily. For months, the world has stared at that doorbell footage, a masked intruder, outside an 84-year-old woman's home. But the real breakdown in the Nancy Guthrie investigation did not happen at 1:47 a.m. with that man. It happened the next day, in broad daylight on that very porch. After the danger passed. Here is the timeline. At 9:50 on January 31st, her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, saw her safe inside her home. By 2:28 a.m., the app linked to her pacemaker stopped syncing with her phone. The exact moment investigators believe she was taken out of range. She was gone. Within days, police processed the house and returned it to the family. That decision is this case's deepest wound. When the desperate family arrived at noon the next day, fearing a medical emergency, no one told them they were stepping on the most crucial ground of a national crime investigation, simply because no one was treating it like one yet. As a criminologist later noted, much of the vital evidence investigators needed could have been ruined at that very moment. No one is blaming the family, but a critical piece of evidence at that entrance. Evidence that, according to some, was never collected, might have vanished in broad daylight. Seeing what lay on that porch, you understand why this case may never be solved. Before we step past that door and onto the porch, take a second to do something really important. Like this video, and subscribe, and share it. The more people who follow Nancy Guthrie's case, the more pressure builds on those who must answer for this. And in cases like this, pressure is often the only thing that gets results. Let's begin at the threshold. That narrow strip of ground contains far more evidence than it should. The welcome mat itself is completely ordinary, the kind decorating any entryway. Until you realize it was the exact spot the hooded intruder stepped on. He approached and stood directly on it, and everything on his shoe, soles, dirt, gravel, fibers, or traces of where he had been could have transferred right there. But he did more than just stand. According to a profiler who analyzed the video, the suspect moved a flower pot near the entrance, in a clear attempt to block the camera. Imagine that someone cold enough to rearrange the decor mid-act. Every movement stepping on the mat, touching the plant, reaching for the lens was a chance to leave behind a trace of himself. And then, there is the blood. At first, they found dark droplets on the door and porch. The sheriff and DNA testing confirmed they belonged to Nancy. There was no peace here. This was the epicenter of physical evidence in the entire case, and the visual record was almost lost forever. The doorbell camera went offline at 1:47 a.m., and the home lacked the subscription required to save the video. Footage like that is usually overwritten quickly. It required the FBI's Operational Technology Division to recover internal data just to reconstruct the image the public eventually saw. Investigators suggest there were more cameras inside, and experts believe unreleased footage exists, deepening the mystery surrounding that front door. While the digital evidence had to be rescued from the trash, the physical clues at that entrance, those surfaces, a real body, actually touched and crossed, became infinitely more valuable. The welcome mat's forensic value did not go unnoticed. Former FBI agent Jason Pack, analyzing the video for CBS News, noted that the masked figure appears to have stepped directly onto it, explaining that a mat can trap microparticles from footwear traces. A forensic lab could link to a specific location. His hope was that investigators secured it, but no one has confirmed whether they actually did. The sheriff refused to detail what evidence was collected, and online rumors that the mat was left behind remain unconfirmed by officials. So we must treat it as an open question, not a fact, though it remains a massive question mark. If the scene's most heavily trafficked area was never secured, the key to identifying the suspect might have been left to rot, and a simple welcome mat is precisely the kind of evidence forensic labs dream of. The mud and sand trapped in those fibers can be compared against soil samples from the surrounding area, and when they do not match, they point elsewhere to another neighborhood or even a distant region. That is the silent power of trace evidence. It can place a stranger in a very specific spot. Leaving it behind, if that is what happened, meant losing a critical key to unlocking where the suspect had been. To understand how such a crucial piece of evidence fell under suspicion, one must understand that night and the morning that followed. On Saturday night, January 31st, Nancy sat down for dinner with her daughter, Annie Guthrie, and her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni. Later, around 9:45 p.m., Cioni drove her to her home in Catalina Foothills, an affluent, quiet enclave in northeast Tucson. He did not just drop her off at the curb. He told investigators he waited until the garage door closed at 9:50, ensuring she was safely inside. That is the very last confirmed moment Nancy Guthrie was known to be safe. What followed happened in the shadows, traced almost entirely by the digital trail left behind in her wake. At 1:47 a.m., her doorbell camera was disconnected. Roughly 25 minutes later, another camera in the area captured movement. It was a person, but no useful recording was captured. Then, at 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker app completely stopped syncing with her phone. To investigators, that final disconnect meant she was gone. At some point in those 41 minutes, Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home. The next morning brought the slow and agonizing process through which they would discover the unthinkable. Nancy missed church on Sunday. Around 11, a friend from her congregation called the family. Before noon, relatives had already arrived at the house. They called 911 at 12:03, and officers arrived by 12:15. The next day, the sheriff confirmed what the evidence was already screaming: not a wandering or a fall, but a crime. The following days transformed this local tragedy into a national news story. At a press conference on February 5th, the Sheriff's Department and the FBI announced a joint investigation, offering a $50,000 reward. By then, the case had already escalated to the White House. The president ordered federal agencies to assist. Just moments ago, President Donald J. Trump posted this message on his network: "I spoke with Savannah Guthrie. I let her know that I have directed all federal agencies to be at the full disposal of the family and local law enforcement. We will immediately deploy all resources to bring her mother back home safe and sound. Our nation's prayers are with her and her family. May God bless and protect Nancy." Investigators confirmed ransom notes were sent to local media outlets, which the family took with desperate seriousness, even though agents warned they contained no proof of life. Savannah Guthrie and her siblings recorded a video plea. They were ready to talk, but needed to know if their mother was still alive. In those early hours, before clear forensic analysis, the sheriff was blunt. No one was ruled out yet. That early caution and the family's subsequent official exoneration are now a permanent part of the case file. But look back at that midday arrival, long before those statements. The family did not find a secured scene inside a strict police perimeter. They arrived at their mother and grandmother's house, sensing that something was terribly wrong, and their first fear was the usual one: that an elderly woman, dependent on daily meds, had fallen or taken ill overnight. The back door was left ajar. Her phone, keys, and purse were still inside. Nothing about it looked like a crime scene that needed preserving. So, no one walked in with a detective's caution. No one warned them, because no one knew the reality yet. Let us be clear, as cruel internet rumors have tried to weaponize this family's grief into a false confession. As the investigation went viral across social media and the online true crime community, suspicion quickly turned to Nancy's inner circle: the son-in-law who drove her home and the relatives who discovered the scene. Sheriff Chris Nanos addressed it head-on. He stated bluntly that the entire family, including children and their spouses, had been cleared of suspicion, having cooperated fully at every single step, voluntarily handing over phones, vehicles, and access to their homes, making any suggestion otherwise not just false, but cruel. This morning, every member of the Guthrie family has been formally cleared, while investigators on the Nancy Guthrie case shift their focus to key DNA evidence. The Pima County Sheriff stated, "To be absolutely clear, the Guthrie family, including siblings and spouses, has been cleared of suspicion. To suggest otherwise is not only wrong, but cruel. The Guthries are victims, plain and simple." Sources say DNA from a glove found near the home is being tested at a private lab in Florida. The glove is one of 16 collected from roadsides, which police believe were dropped by searchers tracking the area. He also shut down rumors of a new suspect of interest with a single, definitive word: no. That is why, when we point out a mistake made on that front porch, the failure lies in how they handled the crime scene, not with a family stepping into their own nightmare without warning or guidance. And while you are here with me, I want to know something. Where are you watching from? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments below. It helps us see how far Nancy's story has traveled, and how many people, in so many places, are still searching for this 84-year-old woman. This brings us to the crucial decision experts are questioning. Days after Nancy vanished, The Pima County Sheriff's Department finally processed her home. Believing they had everything they needed, investigators handed the property back to the family. Reports show they released the scene long before this ever became the full criminal investigation it eventually turned into. What is truly shocking is that the sheriff has practically admitted to that very mistake. Nanos conceded that, looking back, he probably should have secured the scene for longer. His deputies processed it to what they thought was completion, following standard protocol to return the house. But he later admitted it was premature. At the time, they did not even know what they were dealing with. Looking back at it now, I probably would have. But I will say this. We processed that scene and gathered everything we believed was there. My team handled it. I have to place absolute faith in their skills and abilities, and I believe they did a pretty good job. But with another agency stepping in to help now, we are, just like with you, an open book. But how do we help? There is something people miss. I heard your question about why we left and let anyone walk in. Look, once we finish processing a scene, we simply hand the property back to the owners. In this case, we gave it back to the family, and we cannot just walk back in. We have to contact the relatives again and ask them for permission to re-enter. So yes, in hindsight, I definitely should have held off a bit longer before doing that. That is a jarring statement about the home of a woman we later learned was violently abducted. They surrendered the scene before understanding what happened. The official record shows why this matters. During those first few days, with the home unsecured, reporters and photographers marched up the gravel driveway to the front door. They photographed a camera tripod, an envelope package, and droplets later confirmed to be Nancy's blood. Others lined up outside that door with cameras and phones. Private security did not arrive to guard the entrance and push people back until late afternoon. Consequently, the very ground an expert investigator would want untouched and analyze the porch, the welcome mat, was exposed to the heavy foot traffic a national news story attracted. That was when one criminologist used a single, devastating word. Dr. Casey Jordan appeared on News Nation, discussing the lack of useful public information and linking it directly to the poorly managed scene. She noted that key evidence investigators needed was likely ruined when they surrendered the scene back to the family after only a few days. I believe that is the main reason to suspect this was a violent crime motivated by money. Look, I met Savannah over 30 years ago when she was a reporter at Court TV, and we worked together. And I saw her just a few months back while covering the latest criminal case on the Today Show. Ultimately, Savannah is a household name. She is much more than just a public figure. She is incredibly popular and, one would assume, quite wealthy. Because of that, she would want to keep this quiet and theoretically has deep motivation if hit with a ransom demand. A single word aimed not at a person, but at a choice. And she is not the only voice. Private investigator Lisa Rebikoff-Mooney told Radar Online that police failed to secure the scene, predicting this case will be studied in textbooks as a prime example of what not to do. She criticized both the hasty release of the home and the endless parade of press conferences. The picture she paints is of a violent kidnapping, handled during its most critical hours, with far too little control. The criticism also came from inside the police department itself. Sergeant Aaron Cross, head of the Pima Deputies Association, described chaos and communication breakdowns in the initial response. He claimed that many officers began to view the entire case as nothing more than an ego trip for the sheriff. Steve Moore, a retired FBI agent, put it bluntly, "Chaos at a crime scene means nobody in charge knows what they are doing. A tight operation moves fast, but never messily." That is right. You simply cannot afford to have that kind of confusion at a crime scene. Let me break this down, because with so many moving parts in this case, it is easy to get lost. But when law enforcement steps in, you are the ones who have always handled this kind of work. None of this is directed at the family. Every single bit points directly to the decisions of command. Tensions quickly flared. Reports emerged of deep friction between the local sheriff's department and the federal agents on the case. Sources told the New York Post that the FBI wanted a more active role, but could not take over without a formal family request. Not everyone interpreted that heavy silence in the same way. One former agent suggested the media blackout was strategic, a calculated move to avoid tipping off the suspect they were hunting. That is the deeply frustrating nature of this case. The same silence could be a calculated trap or a crumbling investigation, and from the outside, we just cannot tell. If you have stayed with me this far, do me a quick favor. Leave a comment that simply says, "Still here." Let us see how many are still watching closely, after so many months of deep mystery. Public attention is the one thing this investigation cannot afford to lose, and your comments keep the spotlight on it. So, who was lurking at that door? And why does the answer make the botched crime scene so hard to forgive? This is where the public evidence and expert analysis begin to paint a picture, even though no suspect has ever been named. After forensic analysis of the footage, the FBI described the figure as a male, roughly 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 inches tall, with a medium build, carrying a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack, an item sold exclusively at a major retail chain, the kind of detail that narrows down the buyers. On camera, he is eerily calm, unhurried, with absolutely no signs of panic. This was no random, sloppy burglary by someone with frayed nerves. He was a cold, calculating figure standing at a stranger's door in the dead of night, watching his angles and adjusting the security camera before moving in. Analysts see that chilling composure as pure premeditation. This person planned, watched, and arrived, knowing exactly who and what they were targeting that night. Criminal profilers always point to the same deeply unsettling detail. Dr. Casey Jordan suggests it was someone who knew Nancy, even if she had no idea who he was. Perhaps someone who discovered her through her daughter's public life, slowly developing a dark, dangerous obsession. Dr. Ann Burgess, a pioneer in criminal profiling, believes the suspect is a local, likely jobless, who secretly craves the media attention, devouring every single podcast and headline written about his crime. The only thing I would add is to look closely at anyone who was unemployed. Yes, someone living off odd jobs. And as you mentioned, she raised a much darker possibility that the masked intruder might have been silenced by someone higher up to erase all links to the crime. These are just theories, not active police conclusions, but they share a dark thread, a calculated act with a clear purpose. Questions also linger about how he navigated the home. Former FBI agent Raymond Carr believes the open back door was the entry point, not the exit, and he does not rule out multiple intruders. I do not believe that back door was an exit. I think it was the entry point. That is how they slipped in, likely opening it to let other accomplices inside the house, while the first suspect came through the front. But I agree with the SWAT commander that they had to exit through the front, given the blood evidence found on the steps and the porch. I have absolutely no doubt she was taken out through the front door, but there were multiple entry points that allowed the intruders to infiltrate different areas of the property. Even so, the blood on the porch clearly marked the escape route. Whoever took Nancy carried her out through the front. And inside, as News Nation reported, there was zero sign of a struggle. Most of the rooms were completely untouched. A violent abduction that left a peaceful interior and a blood-stained threshold, the entire mystery written on the home's outer edge. Then come the false leads, which only prove just how much time, energy, and resources this case has swallowed up. A pair of black gloves was found about 2 miles away, and early tests suggested a match. For a brief second, it looked like the ultimate breakthrough. But the DNA didn't match the crime scene or the national database. The gloves simply belonged to a restaurant worker with absolutely no connection to the case. A man claiming to be a delivery driver was detained south of Tucson and later cleared. He insisted he had nothing to do with any kidnapping and had never even heard of Nancy. Meanwhile, the family endured a cruel wave of ransom notes, at least one tracing back to a fraudster, who admitted he just wanted to see if they would reply. Every single lead had to be chased down and ruled out, while the family braced themselves for an answer that never came. As the dead ends piled up, the official response intensified. On February 12th, the FBI raised the reward to $100,000, releasing a detailed suspect profile. The family added their own $1 million reward, while a community tip line cleared $100,000 after a massive anonymous donation, bringing the total combined payout to nearly $1.2 million. Even so, the sheriff offered a chilling assessment of the situation. He believed Nancy was targeted specifically, not chosen at random, and warned the public not to let their guard down. Whoever did this, his message implied, had a clear motive and a plan. What investigators do seem to have is forensic evidence from inside the home. Reports point to mixed DNA, including a single strand of hair. That single hair has become a quiet beacon of hope. If this trace evidence belongs to the man who abducted Nancy, the most advanced tool in the forensic arsenal might achieve what a massive physical search could not. If this is the kind of careful, honest analysis you look for, not the loudest voice, but the most accurate, then like this video, subscribe, and share it with those you care about. Not to frighten them, but because the simplest, harshest lesson of this case is how fast any ordinary night can shatter and how much depends on the people around you knowing exactly what to do and what never to touch. So, hold both loss and hope close together. Both are real, but the latter is far greater. The theory of loss is simple, though it remains a theory. Release a crime scene early, and people will walk right through it. A grieving family left in limbo, surrounded by the heavy foot traffic that a national news story naturally attracts. Surfaces are touched, items are shifted, and none of it is intentional. Whatever the cost, it lies with the decision to release the scene, not with those who crossed it without warning. But hope matters more. Genetic genealogist C.C. Moore has put it bluntly. If the suspect left DNA at the scene, she believes he can and will eventually be identified through investigative genetic genealogy. Retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer has pointed to that very same path as the most likely route to a suspect. And Steve Moore argues the public only sees a fraction of what is recovered, since trace evidence is often invisible to the naked eye, and a crime scene with one hair usually has more. The surfaces the intruder touched might still reveal something. That is why the welcome mat is no minor detail. Investigative genetic genealogy does not identify a suspect directly. It takes an unknown DNA profile, searches databases for distant relatives, and builds family trees until narrowing the names down to one. It has cracked decades-old cold cases, and it does not require the suspect to have ever been arrested before. So, if that hair belongs to him, it could be the thread that, with patient pulling, leads straight to his door. But here is the unsettling symmetry of the case. Genetic genealogy requires DNA to be found, bagged, and meticulously preserved. Trace analysis demands collecting items like the welcome mat before the world steps on them. Both methods were strongest early on untouched ground, before releasing the scene. So, when experts speak about what might have been lost, they point to the exact moment this case was easiest to solve. The difference between an answer still waiting inside a lab and one carried away silently on the sole of a shoe. So, direct the questions where they actually belong. Not at a family already cleared, nor at the son-in-law who drove Nancy home, saw her safely inside, and was ruled out. It belongs to the decision to treat the home of an 84-year-old woman, violently abducted, as property to release in days, rather than a crime scene to guard, control, and exhaustively search. That is where the duty lies. A clear answer on what was collected from that doorstep, and if any remaining DNA can still be recovered by returning to secure whatever is left. Neither is an accusation. Both are simply the basic steps of a thorough investigation. Beneath all of this is a human being. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. The sheriff believes she was deliberately targeted, not chosen at random, and the response has matched that urgency. With federal help and the search crossing 100 days by mid-May, then hitting 4 months on June 1st, every grim milestone reached brings no arrest. Only another urgent plea for help. Savannah Guthrie has appealed repeatedly on behalf of her mother, telling any captor the family is ready to listen and pay for her safe return. But they must know without a doubt that Nancy is alive. The community in Catalina foothills, where neighbors said they could never have imagined such a nightmare, has watched one of their own vanish from inside her own home, and in their grief, they are still waiting. And that welcome mat at her front door, the very surface that might hold the clearest trace of the man who took her, could, for all the public has been told, still be sitting exactly where it has always been. A criminologist's word, paired with a welcome mat whose exact fate at that door remains a mystery, does not condemn those who love Nancy Guthrie. Instead, it points to a dark decision and the haunting question left behind. Can what was lost along the way ever be recovered? And whether the most ordinary object, at the most critical doorway in this cold case, can still help bring an 84-year-old woman home. And before we close, thank you. Truly. This channel only exists because of viewers like you, those who demand a deep, meticulous story and stick around until the end. If you value these deep dive investigations, consider joining our membership. It unlocks exclusive perks and premium content, directly supporting this style of journalism: deliberate, deeply researched, and honest. Regardless of how you support, the fact that you are still here, asking the right questions, is what truly matters. If you know anything, a name, a car, or someone whose behavior shifted in early February, people are waiting. Call the FBI. At 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can reach the Pima County Sheriff at 520-351-4900. You can also contact 88 Crime. A reward of nearly $1.2 million remains active for information leading to Nancy Guthrie. You can remain completely anonymous. You only have to be right once. Everything in this broadcast is sourced from public reports and official statements available at the time of publication. No one mentioned here is accused of any crime, and the entire Guthrie family, including Tom Schione, has been formally exonerated by the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Any unconfirmed claims, like online rumors regarding uncollected evidence at the door, are clearly identified as such. If you have any information regarding this case, please contact the proper authorities.